just to kick things off, I'm wondering if each of the panelists in turn, and anybody can start off, if each of you would share with us any synthetic thoughts you have after taking in all the talks together, or any follow-up comments or questions you have, including for other panelists, just to get us going. Yep.
I forgot to say something, so I'd love to say it.
Perfect. That is a perfect opportunity for that.
So Rob and I have discussed this, but I forgot to say why the existing studies on lethal control are not adequate, including my own. And Rob and I have discussed this, not for very long, but for a few minutes last night. We need basically the proper scientific test of lethal control, in my opinion, and that means randomized assignment of control and treatment properties. They did this in the United Kingdom with badger culling and selective removal of badgers, and controls where badgers were not removed, to understand how bovine tuberculosis was spread from farm to farm. And dang it, if the United Kingdom did it, we can do it. I think it's time for that, because that's the gold standard in, say, medical interventions. We need to really know what the effect of these controls are. I don't know, Rob, if you want to add anything?
Yeah, other than I'd agree, we're hoping to find study areas. Maybe, we're working in the Colville Reserve. Maybe we can have a control there. Treatment areas in other areas, maybe some, we really have to get at this, and also look at different scales. As I indicated, we looked at it at a large scale. Some have looked at it at very small scales. We need multiple scales with treatments and controls to really nail this thing down. So, I don't think the story will be done for a while yet, and that's assuming we get funding to do this kind of thing. But we will.
Anybody else? Questions or follow-up comments?
From our perspective with Watch Smart Fish and Wildlife, this is a great value for us. I mean, a couple elements here. Hearing the discussion on breeder removal and those kinds of things. We manage other species where we think about the social interactions and territoriality and those kinds of things, so that we're all ears there and anxious to listen and learn from that. And then also a lot of the good presentations on the human dimension side. We also are keenly aware that probably the biggest challenge we have is on the human dimension side, so a lot of good value there.
Everybody else okay? Just want to sure, absolutely. Let's keep going.
Look, the data is there. There's plenty of data. We could do all kinds of science. And what I see in my own personal experience and my colleagues here is often it doesn't matter how much data you have. You could have mountains of data, and people will believe what they want to believe, right? If they want to believe in the tooth fairy, they're going to do it forever. And we need some other solutions, because you can try and bury them in science and data, and they're just going to say, I don't believe you. And that's the end of the story. And it doesn't matter. The facts often don't matter, right? A lot of this stuff is personal belief, and it's now become partisan politics in addition to that. So it is really a partisan issue. And scientific facts are almost becoming irrelevant. I'm sorry to say.
Yep. All right.
Well, so I guess for me, I see great value, first of all, in how many people you're able to turn out that care about conservation, and that really that's meaningful. And what I hope to see is more people that can be brought in that maybe aren't 2 or 3 standard deviations beyond the norm, that are kind of out there in their own universe where they could not possibly be convinced by any new data or any science. But bring in the people that care about conservation, that do have some similarities in their thoughts and goals, and let them be advocates in their communities and in the interest groups that they're in, to bring that message back to others. Because Rob's right. I mean, when it comes from scientists, we're viewed as a bunch of liberal screwballs, and so for a fair portion of the population, that message just isn't heard. And so what we need are people that can take that message back to those groups.
I think the real problem I've always experienced, it's still going on today, is lack of trust. Lack of trust from people from all the different groups, whatever you want to be a group of or a member of. But I still think if you take the normal folks, not the extremes, talk to those audiences, whether you're talking to a group of hunters out in the field or a general audience, you can get people's trust to be honest, square, talk to them straight up, and explain what's going on. There's great gains to be made. I've seen it over and over and over. If people can talk to you one-on-one, and when they start, well, I heard this or I heard that, what do you think? Well, if they trust you, their ears are open and they're willing to listen. And I still believe in that, or I wouldn't be up here doing this shit.
The optimist. Hey, that's why we know.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thanks for starting us off. Let's get into the meaty part of the Q&A and start with the questions from the audience. I'll turn things over to John.
All right, guys. So the first one here is fairly a direct question, and it's really aimed at our Department of Fish and Wildlife, but I'd like to broaden it a little bit. I'll read you the question and then maybe broaden it a bit. But last year, the WDFW lethally removed the wedge pack due to livestock loss. And now the newly formed profanity peak pack has reestablished in the same area and is basically doing the same sort of thing. So given what you've heard today and also what you've learned from that experience, and it's aimed more at Donnie, maybe take the first shot at how would you adjust the response, or how would you approach the lethal control question moving forward when these issues again come up? And then I would broaden it a bit to ask the other people on the panel, what would they offer? What would be the most important piece from what you've either said or heard or learned in your setting that you would offer to our state agency to help guide that decision process? Because it's not an easy one. It's not one that one person obviously makes here. So, Donnie?
That's a great question. In 2012 is when we experienced the depredations on the wedge pack, and we removed most of the pack, if not all at the time. We think there's probably a couple individuals still there. And then, what's changed since then, and how will we do it different in another pack? And there was part of the question was profanity peak pack. Actually, I think a lot's changed in the last 2 years. That was our first experience with that side of wolf management. We did have our wolf conservation management plan done, and that was our roadmap at that time. But that is fairly high level, and after going through the wedge pack scenario, we've invested quite a bit of time and energy and effort, along with many of the folks in this room, with our wolf advisory group, and since then have established the stuff that I talked about today, the checklist of kind of preventative things that can be put on the landscape, the agreements, the protocol for when we might act. And even in that wolf advisory group, we don't come to complete consensus on those issues. They're really tough issues, but it is something that we have as now our roadmap. And so as we move forward past, we kind of got those things completed after the wedge pack, learned a lot from that, and we're using those tools that we have now as our protocol and trying to stick to those as close as we can. And so that's how we're doing it differently.
Yeah, and so again, to follow up at the second part, if you guys on the panel would offer, your wisest nugget of information to help inform that process, what would it be?
Well, I think from the talks today, you can anticipate where problems are going to be, and talking about risk. I think when you see high-risk areas, you need to focus on them before the problem starts and try and apply some coexistence measures, non-lethal measures, or preventative measures. And some of that might be just sitting down with the producers that are going to be in those high-risk locations in the spring. And it's just a matter of, the livestock are going to go there, and the wolves are already there, so you can anticipate it's going to be a problem. So work on that now, but don't wait till it happens.
if I could add to that with an anecdote from Michigan, the justification for hunting wolves in Michigan is partly based on a one-time spike in depredations, and when those data were examined closely, it turned out one farm was responsible for the majority of this spike. That if you remove that one farm, that year was not exceptional, and they don't have a lot of livestock depredations in Michigan generally. And when that one farm was investigated, it was found to have extensive bone piles and carcasses left, and cows that were alive in very poor condition. So that particular farm represented a problem for management. It was actually breaking state laws about carcass disposal. And I'd like to add that our risk map doesn't distinguish problem wolves from problem places. And that could be a landscape, or it could be a farm, or it could be a wolf pack. So I would second Carter's recommendation about really understanding the system we're working in.
You know, I'll add about what Carter said and what Adrian's done, risk mapping. We're in the process of developing risk maps for Washington State. WFW is funding that particular effort, as well as the state legislative funds. Hopefully we'll have that. It's just we wish we had it right now. If we don't, and it will take a little while. But we're well on to trying to get that accomplished. Some other things are doing these interventions and risk mapping, and just to be aware that many people want this, the state agency wants it, WFW wants it, but there are organizations who don't want risk mapping, they don't want non-lethal interventions, they don't want any of these things. In my opinion, they want as many livestock interventions as possible to liquidate wolves, and that's the reality that we're facing. And we're trying to forestall it. Next.
I guess from a behavioral perspective, one thing that needs to change, and a number of folks have been interested in doing this recently, but so initially Defenders of Wildlife was seen as sort of integral during the reintroduction for compensating livestock producers for lost livestock. That made sense from a political perspective. But what you're doing is essentially you're rewarding bad behavior or no behavior change in that case. And so what needs to happen for those that are forward thinking about these livestock approaches and how to deal with producers is putting incentives for non-lethal control, for doing the right thing, if you will, for preventing those livestock depredations from happening in the first place. Because if you wait until after the depredation, you've got a pissed off producer, and you've got to send out somebody like Carter that's got to talk them down, and maybe half the time you might be able to talk them into a non-lethal method, but the majority of the time they're going to say, hey, just get rid of it. I want to move on. I don't want to deal with it. So if we can put those measures in, and if you can create incentive structures for doing that ahead of time, then you can avoid those problematic scenarios and maybe gain yourself a little bit of confidence.
Can you talk into the microphone a little bit? It's hard to hear you. It's as loud as I get.
It's not on?
Or shout.
Yeah, just talk loud.
Professor Lang.
Yes.
Okay, everyone like a professor. And look, in terms of these
It's on.
preventative measures, again, recently here, again, I'm going to come back to politics. We've had livestock operators sign on or agree with me that we would radio collar sheep, ear tag sheep, monitor bulls, provide convenient super dogs, the whole 9 yards. We've done that with other operators. We've experienced sheep depredations, and we nipped it in the bud. And I've had other operators who wanted to work with me and decided not to for whatever reason, and bad things happen. These are political decisions where folks want to do the right thing, end up not doing the right thing, and it blows up in your face. And so like I say, some people, some organizations want as many livestock depredations as possible. And good operators are sometimes succumbing to that pressure.
Any
how do you fix that? I don't know.
Any insights from the protected areas?
Yeah, I'm succumbing to social pressure here. You know, just an idea, and this is not my area, but when I first came to Montana, there was opposition to zonal management that had been implemented in the Midwest prior to wolf recovery in the Northern Rockies. But zonal management's worth being thought about, because what it means is there's good places for wolves and there's bad places for wolves. And the bad places we manage in favor of people. And in the good places, we manage in favor of not just wolves, but other wildlife. And, you know, quite frankly, you know, so that's a perspective that I should not have, because people never like me speaking outside the bounds of a national park. You know, stay in the park, keep your views to yourself. But, you know, the pressure on national parks is immense now. And what we're trying to do is simulate primitive, primeval nature. And that's getting harder and harder to do. But that is really what all of these big carnivores need. They need space. We don't want to give it to them. That's essentially the argument. So how do we work on that as a society? We have to decide that we want these animals, and we have to make places available for them to live. And so that is different than national parks. We are the carve it out and leave it alone cadre, but that's really, and I'm not sure that's helpful in addition to everything that's been said. Great. The only other thing I can add is that not all wolves are equal. And so Adrian alluded to this, I think Jeremy a little bit too, Rob probably for sure, but you know, if you come across as we're not going to kill wolves at all, people will consider you unreasonable. But targeted interventions, Carter said proactive, those are kind of things most reasonable people agree on. And our work with hunting behavior does show that there's a division of labor in wolf packs, that different aged and different sex wolves do different things. So if you can target individuals, in addition to what Adrian's arguing for, which is targeting areas, packs, and farms, when you get finer scaled than that, different individuals will have different roles. You'll rarely know that. That's probably unreasonable expectation. But nonetheless, if you can get, and Adrian had it in his talk, the culprit, sometimes you take out one wolf, and they're fabulous observational learners. Fabulous. So behavior spread rapidly through packs. Get that bad apple, and you can kill one wolf, not the entire pack. Is that a reasonable expectation for most landscapes? Probably not. Hence, I said all this through social pressure.
Scott?
It doesn't work anyway, so.
Forgive me, Donnie, if I don't recall all the details of your talk, but I'm just curious to what extent stakeholders were involved in the planning process for management of wolves in your state?
It started with the development of our wolf conservation management plan, where we had a stakeholder group, if you will, of 17 members that helped craft that plan from the start to the end, and then a series of both blind and peer review. And then now understanding the human dimension side of this is a big piece of the puzzle. As I talked about, the Wolf Advisor Group, that is a nine-member group of stakeholders. And right now, because some of the biggest challenges in front of us right now are with wolves and livestock, that group is primarily comprised of those array of those values. And then as we pick up more ones, to address wolves and ungulates, the composition of that group will likely change.
Thank you.
I'd like to, Doug's a good friend, so I'm going to tell him to go back to the national park. I want to take issue with the idea that certain human densities are just way too high for coexistence. I think Spain and Italy teaches us something different about wolves and people. And no one would have expected coyotes to recolonize Chicago, and urban Chicago is at higher coyote densities than rural areas just outside the city. That I'm citing Stan Garrett's work. I think this issue relates to our acceptance of them and whether people are going to kill wolves or coyotes. And so I don't think we should set a sort of a human population density as a target. We should be looking more carefully at poaching as an issue or illegal killing of various sorts.
So let me respond to that. Can everybody hear me? And that's a great debate. Europe is an excellent example. There's more wolves in more places. There's probably more wolf killing because when wolves overflow onto human-dominated landscapes, that's what happens. Coexistence is hard. But secondly, and this is my bias working in a national park, those wolves are heavily subsidized by humanity. The wolves in Spain, for example, feed on carrion. Half their diet is livestock carrion. The wolves in Italy hit dumps. And if that's acceptable to people, then I'm in favor of it. And that argues against zonal management. Close friends of mine from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in Montana, don't even bring up zonal management. And that's the argument against zonal management. If a pack exists outside the zone of tolerance for wolves and they're not doing anything, why not tolerate them? That's a great argument. But being from a park, and Adrian was at a conference in Yellowstone a couple weeks ago, so was Jeremy, Bob Crabtree, intrinsic value of nature is important to a guy like me who works for an agency that has preservation as its goal. So wolves eating out of garbage dumps and eating livestock carrion, I wonder about. I'm not against it, and Adrian brings up a very good point, but I am uncomfortable a little bit with that. And I'm not saying, again, that I'm against it, but that's worth thinking about. Secondly, being with wolf recovery since the beginning in Yellowstone and having toxic conversations with person after person, both livestock and elk and deer, trying to head problems off at the pass has become a very attractive idea to me. And so just having some places where you're saying humans get the nod here, wolves, bears, cougars get the nod here, seems to me an idea worth considering, but I acknowledge Adrian's point.
I'd just like to add to that, I have some experience working in Europe, as I've alluded to earlier, and I would certainly like to point out that there are going to be regional differences, I think, in attitudes towards wolves between, let's say, Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and let's say Northern Europe or Scandinavia. In Scandinavia, the Scandinavian Wolf Project has documented mortality in the wolf population based on radio-collared animals and other indices, and have a pretty solid figure of an annual mortality rate that is 50% poaching, which has significantly decreased the intrinsic rate of growth in the population from about 25 to 30% down to about 10 to 12%. Which ironically might have actually facilitated greater acceptance of wolves in Norway and Sweden. It's a concept we're playing with right now just because it's depressed the population growth and given people more time to get used to animals. But I worked extensively, primarily with hunters in Norway and to some extent in Sweden, and know that the hunting element should not be overlooked in this context. Hunters perceive wolves as competitors. Wolves also are killing their hunting dogs, which is pretty, hunting dogs are used extensively in Norway and Sweden for hunting. And so there is a real conflict there. And a good friend of mine I'm meeting for dinner tonight, who I grew up hunting with here in Washington State, asked me to make sure that I get across the point that we need to also consider the hunters in this context here, managing in the Pacific Northwest and relative to managing ungulate populations. And I think one important thing to remember is that a consistent policy, government policy, is really important. Two-way communication, adaptive management, which sounds like that's the case here in Washington, and an open dialogue with all impacted groups. You're not going to have full acceptance across the board, but I think it's really important to have that local contact and dialogue with those key stakeholders and listen to them and understand their fears and concerns. Thanks.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to additional questions. We want to get to as many as we possibly can. So, Doug, I'm going to hit you with more pressure and give you another one. This one pertains very directly to your talk. The question is, could the lack of the seasonal pattern in dispersal in Montana and Wyoming be related to more packs with simple structure in those states relative to the baseline of Yellowstone? And following on from that, are overall dispersal rates in those states lower than in Yellowstone?
I'll answer the second question first, and that is I don't know. Mike has been closer to that paper than I have, but we could probably address that. And I think the seasonal pattern that's shown in Yellowstone is very typical of wolf populations that are not pressured by humans. In other words, social instability leads to movement. All wolves are trying to ultimately breed. And so that winter period, you know, Scott defined it in his talk, the breeding season is February, you know, but, you know, movements before the breeding season are wolves trying to find breeding opportunities. And so that's why you get that kind of peak in the winter. Wolf conflict is high in the fall. Scott had that too. That's because that's the hardest time of year to make a kill. All the prey are healthy. We think that's when our wolf killing peaks, is right about now. Prey are healthy. And I think the patterns for Wyoming and Montana that were depicted there deal with when you alter those patterns through human exploitation, it changes the pattern. You know, wolf harvest through legal control actions in Wyoming is fairly high. Wolves are killed. At least this is the data set, not necessarily now. And so that alters their natural dispersal patterns. And I think that's true for Montana. In other words, the assumption that a lot of wolf managers make, that I said in my talk, is wolves adapt and deal. And so there isn't a seasonal pattern that would be considered natural when you have a lot of removals.
All right, thanks. We'll go to the next question.
Get another fairly specific one. It's not really for any particular person, so you could all chime in, but there wasn't much talk and no really evidence presented on any correlation that may or may not exist between livestock depredation and the abundance of natural prey, so ungulates in the system. And could you speak to what is known about that, and is there research ongoing that's trying to get at that?
Risk mapping stuff that we're doing in Washington State is looking at that. Zoe's out in the audience, and that's one of the things is how does the abundance of natural prey and the types of natural prey present on the landscape in Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana influence livestock depredation.
Okay.
So keep tuned.
So it's ongoing.
It is happening. It's just we just started it. So basically, we just started a whole lot of stuff.
Adrian?
Let me speak to that for Wisconsin and Minnesota. In 2004, our first effort at a risk map was kind of primitive, and we found a positive correlation between deer abundance and livestock depredations. Namely, you got more livestock depredations in areas that had higher deer abundance, which goes against expectations, right? And we speculated that possibly deer are coming onto pastures to browse on the edges where there's young leaf flush and forage. And in the course of pursuing deer, wolves encounter calves. And so the depredation is incidental to the pursuit of prey. That's complete speculation. It's just an idea. And then in our subsequent risk map at a much finer scale, we could find no effect of deer in just Wisconsin alone. We haven't analyzed Minnesota at a finer scale. So right now, I'm a little confused about the issue of natural prey, but I should point out in my part of the world, deer densities are very high. Wolves are running out of food very often.
Great.
That's a good understatement. You might not recognize that.
Okay, I've got one for Jeremy, but others could certainly take this one up as well. The question is, do you have any advice as a psychologist for scientists studying carnivores in regions with very negative perceptions of predators?
I feel like I should pass the mic to Carter. You know, most of these, I think these guys all know, and they learn pretty quickly that that you need to be trusted. And in order to retain that trust, you need to speak within, where your data allow you to speak. as people step away from their data and move into conjecture and opinion, and that can actually reduce your level of trust with some constituencies and hurt you in the long run. That's my answer as a psychologist. My answer as a scientist is to hell with that. You should say what you think and advocate for what you care about. But there's a tension there between the level of trust that you have within a community and your desire to assert your own views. And that's something that I think all scientists have to deal with.
Yep.
I just remembered my time in Norway and in Sweden too, that the word ulveforsker, which literally means wolf researcher in Norwegian, was synonymous with wolf advocate often. And that really wasn't quite the case. I could tell you stories, but we tried to come across as being as objective as possible, but that meant really going out into these rural areas and meeting folks one-on-one in small groups and telling them what we're doing and showing them the data and being honest about what we knew and what we didn't know, and not trying to hide anything relative to the negative effects of wolves. And that actually resonated quite a bit with many people, I found. Because I worked for a few years during my tenure with Nina, I worked basically as an outreach specialist dealing with bears and wolves in their range in Norway, particularly central Norway, where there are a lot of conflicts with brown bears, and southeastern Norway with wolves. And the perception was that if you can gain some trust, they may not still like wolves, but at least you can start to build trust also with researchers. And in Norway, researchers are separate from the government. They're funded by the government, but they don't work for the government. And it's also incumbent, I think, upon local and regional and even statewide or national managers to also go around and talk to folks and not be afraid to take the heat sometimes. Because I know that Scandinavians are considered to be pretty civilized, but I've been at some fairly uncivilized wolf meetings in Norway and Sweden. So the temperatures get hot. It's tough sometimes.
I alluded in my talk to a communications experiment that Jeremy's team did. I was wondering if you might share that briefly, because I think it's illuminating about talking to folks with strongman discussions.
Yeah, so so this resulted from the work that we did with black bears, and we essentially wanted to understand how to communicate with people about carnivores, and so based upon the research that we'd done, the predictive model that we'd set up, or explanatory model, I should say, we had looked at some treatments, and these treatments are information treatments. Essentially, it's about as much information as you could throw in a PowerPoint slide. So think about 150 words per treatment. And the idea was we had a treatment that basically gave the sort of standard natural history sort of information on bears that you would see. Any extension person would have that information in their presentation. And we gave the sort of the standard be bear aware message that you see that comes from those sorts of groups that are advocating on behalf of bears. And then we gave just a really short slide that talked about the benefits of bears, and those were really, it was cultural benefits, their uses to native populations, and things like ecological benefits, seed dispersal, carrion pickup, that sort of thing. And then we had a pre-treatment measure of their acceptance of bear populations from the survey, the prior survey that we did, and then we looked at post-treatment attitudes. And what we found was the only scenarios that increased people's acceptance of bears were those that included benefits. So you had to be discussing the benefits of bears. And so what that goes against is signage and information that says be bear aware, but doesn't talk about what the beneficial aspects of bears are. And our thinking is, and we don't know, this is just conjecture, but we think what happens is you just talk about being bear aware. What you're essentially doing is you're increasing risk perceptions associated with those animals. You're not telling them why they're beneficial, you're just telling them why they should be afraid of them. And so for people, which is the majority of people that are not like us, that know these things, that care about wildlife, essentially you're just telling them to be afraid of animals. And so you're having the opposite effect of what's intended. I think, is that what you...
All right, thank you.
So kind of a general question to compare Washington to the other places where you guys are working. The question is that the human population of Washington is 3 times higher than the population of Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming combined. Especially on the west side of the mountains, it's even more concentrated there. So the ideas of zoning and dealing with high human densities and wolves are really going to be a major issue for us. So how might the information and experiences you have operate in this sort of a high density situation? And what might be similar, what might be different in terms of these environments and affecting the coexistence of people and carnivores? No.
Yeah, it's something that we in Washington thought about quite a bit. You know, will it be different in Washington because our populace may be a bit different, or a higher human density, and like you said, the west side, east side. And certainly there'll be challenges associated with that, but I think it comes back to what we've heard the other panelists talk about. What we're finding along the way is that the trust is the biggest one, is that with both sides of the extreme or of the polarity there, it's the time that it takes to develop that trust and to start the relationships, maybe more so than just that we have a different cross-section or we have more folks. It still comes down to those one-on-one relationships and the trust and the stakeholders and et cetera.
Just more stakeholders to get trust of. Anybody else want to add to that? Similarities and differences? Yeah, sure, Adrian.
I guess I would just add an element of the public trust philosophy or principle here, that there's a lot of people out there that will never come to public meetings. They'll never respond to calls for public comment, even if they can send them in by email. And I think those people are often waiting to see that their government is being transparent and accountable. So there's individual relationships with interest groups that are obviously critical, but also building trust in the broader public. And that's maybe not a comfort zone for all of us. Certainly not mine, but also a very necessary task. And I think the broadcast media play a role there, an important role.
Well, regarding trust, I can give you some of my experience. When I started this wolf livestock thing, yeah, I worked for the College of Agriculture, so Wazoo College of Agriculture. I'm really actually kind of a redneck, okay? And so I had tons of trust with the ranching community. We have an extensive history. My job was to increase agricultural productivity and so on and so forth. And lobbying organizations for the industry were behind us. They were behind me, publicly behind me. They trusted me. They trusted College of Ag. They know that I don't have an agenda. I'm just an agricultural scientist. And that was all working well. And then the elites come in and destroy that trust, and basically say, thou shalt not cooperate with the Washington State University College of Ag. And for some reason, people believe those, again, political elites. And now how one reestablishes trust in that, I really don't know. I thought we had a great relationship going, and I had everyone on board. And this thing was going like gangbusters until a few folks get up there and turn this into a partisan political issue. And then the trust is gone. Or maybe it's not. But people just do whatever their leaders tell them to do. So you've got to get to them somehow. You can't get to those leaders. Everyone else just follows them at any rate. So I'm negative on that.
I guess I can offer an anecdote regarding trust, and it's a little bit different take than Rob's, but so I'm working on a project currently with Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and we have a, might sound silly by comparison, but our controversy is deer right now. And so our state agency feels like it's pinched between the agricultural community that wants fewer deer on the landscape and hunters that want deer in every other tree, etc. So, and they're feeling immense political pressure. We're working on a project where we're modeling habitats and we're attempting to establish new zones, deer management zones and deer management units for the state. And we had to convince the state representative, whose name is Mudd right now, with his constituents, not to be the one to deliver that message. You know, we said, we'll come, we will stand out in front of the audience, and we'll be the ones to deliver the message, because we come from the state university, and we might not have that high level of trust as you want, but we're several standard deviations beyond the level of trust that one has. So sometimes it's advantageous to have somebody from another group that is trusted with that audience deliver that message. And so, so when I say, benefits associated with bears, it might have to be the state extension people, or it might have to be the wildlife services guys, or it might have to be somebody else that's delivering that message. But it certainly should be somebody that comes from a trusted community, because again, if you know anything about trust, if you're not trusted, they'll probably perceive the opposite of whatever it is in the town.
Okay, thank you. Next question. We have somebody who asked, and this is to the entire slate of speakers, I'm perplexed as to why wolves haven't taken off in the North Cascades, given that it's a national park and about 94% of it is wilderness. Given what we've talked about today and your respective expertises, what questions should land managers be asking to try to solve this riddle or answer this issue? What kind of research should be done? Mm-hmm.
I don't have a very good crystal ball, but from our modeling that we did on a suitable wolf habitat in the state as we developed the Wolf Conservation Management Plan, it does highlight that the North Cascades National Park, and the peninsula all are good wolf habitat. And so knowing like we do that these are great colonizers and they have, we've already seen that track record in the other states, it's probably a matter of time until all the available suitable habitat in Washington is occupied by wolves. And as you saw the map earlier, what we're experiencing right now is just that creep, that wave going from east to west, but there's no reason to think that they're not going to be occupying those areas probably as soon as the next 5 to 7 years, based on our path to recovery so far, what we've seen in terms of population growth. We've modeled that and are publishing that right now. We could see that as reaching our recovery goals of those 15 to 18 successful breeding pair, which of course is a lot more packs, equally distributed around the state in 7 years or so.
I think just real quick too, high country. The same issue, Southwest Colorado, wolves need year-round habitat, not just summer range. All the game goes down in winter, and that's where people live, valley bottoms. So when they hit the winter range, they're encountering people. And that's the issue, what is it, 14 million acres in southern Colorado of public land, but yet a lot of it's high country. And I don't know North Cascades, but I'm going to guess that that's part of the reason there is that it's wild country, but the winter habitat, which in general, this is not a good rule of thumb, but it tends to work. You're dealing with 10 to 20% of the winter range as compared to summer range. So they really get concentrated. They got to go there. It's always low, and low elevation means people. So.
I was just curious if you have a good handle on prey populations in the North Cascades and how they compare to other areas.
That's an excellent question. That wasn't the black-tailed deer density information wasn't a variable that was used in the model. It was an elk-based model. So you're right, the prey base may be a little bit different. We may see different wolf densities or pack sizes and related to prey base. And Doug's point's well taken, that a lot of that stuff is pretty high, but we still expect there's enough prey there to support wolf populations in that area of the state, and that we'll have wolves in those areas.
Thank you.
So we heard about a comparison in how Oregon and Washington are using a checklist of non-lethal methods first before lethal options are kind of brought to the table. And the question here is kind of comparing those two approaches, with it now being law in Oregon to do this. What are your thoughts on, is that a valuable step? Is it a useful step? Is it a necessary step? And if so, when might it occur in Washington? Wow.
Another really good question, one that we've talked about quite a bit. The processes between Oregon and Washington are actually quite similar. I've just recently kind of mapped out with the codified law in Oregon and how that matches Washington. And they're pretty similar between the two states. There are little differences there. One of the ones that I think, and I can't speak for Russ or his stakeholders, specifically, but transparency is really important, and that's part of the one of the values of having that codified is for that transparency of state government. And so we're seeking and trying to do those same sort of things and making information available on our website and using our Wolf advisory group to increase that transparency. And we're learning as we go as well, to meet that transparency, objective that the public hopes to see in us. So, I think that mechanically, the processes are very similar. Oregon looks at towards lethal control after about 4 confirmed depredations. We're in the 3 to 4 range. Oregon requires a few non-lethal preventative measures before they consider that. We may have a few more on the list. There's still lots of good dialogue about what interpretation of those kinds of non-lethals, are they effective, are they not? Still kind of working through that process. But we have heard from our constituent groups the importance of doing that all out in front so that our Washingtonians can see that and are aware of that. And we really are using our Wolf Advisory Group to kind of serve as that medium.
Any insights from others on how to make that work or what to avoid along the way?
I guess speaking from the perspective in Wisconsin and looking back on the last 14 years of my observing depredation management, I think the policies that I'm hearing are more likely to succeed than what Wisconsin tried, although it tried hard with the knowledge we had at hand at the time. And what I think your step-by-step message is telling is that each wolf has value, and therefore we try the non-lethals first and a variety of them. Because by communicating the value of each wolf, I believe from my experience in Wisconsin, the public gets the message that each wolf has value. And more recent results in the last 10 years in Wisconsin are suggesting that when the government showed that each wolf had lower value or no value because they were conducting aggressive lethal control, the public got that message as well and responded in kind. So I'd encourage you not to go to quite the path Wisconsin followed.
One other thought too is talking about the value of wolves, talking about the value of wolf packs, and going back to the previous question even, I think these westward wolf packs are much more valuable to you because those are, I call them puppy factories. Those are stepping stones to get wolves into the western part of the state, to advance the possibilities of delisting wolves sooner and having that population in places you want it, where if you're very aggressive on these western packs, you're just setting it back. So think about that too.
Yeah, let me add to that. I think Carter's dead right here that there's also a huge symbolic or real divide between urban and rural human populations. And partially eliminating western wolf packs and leaving eastern ones in place probably sends the wrong message about people's concerns. So that can build trust as well if folks in Seattle have to live with wolves someday.
All right, thanks. This next questioner thoroughly enjoyed the presentations, but was left wanting a little bit more about any possible relationship between livestock depredations and natural prey availability, or availability of other species. And so they're wondering, across all the speakers, if there are any ongoing studies of this or what you know about that relationship.
Yeah, again, our team is, we're focused primarily on wolf use of livestock, but we are documenting kills of all other natural prey items at the same time. So, you know, if they're taking elk or moose or white-tailed deer or mule deer, we are establishing the kill rates of wolves and so on and so forth. At least during that summer period, when we're funded to do our research on wolf livestock interactions, because the natural prey are there. But we do not have funding to examine wolf use of natural prey during the winter. But I'm working with the Colville tribes, and we will probably do that with the Colville tribes through their support. So that's coming as well, assuming that the program continues. Or if the program ends, as some people wish it to end, then of course we won't win it.
Thanks, Rob. I have to apologize for that. I guess that question was already asked and not shelved away, but I appreciate you fielding it again and covering for me. So I'll quickly switch to another one. Does pack complexity lead to a better, quote-unquote, quality of life for a pack?
Does pack complexity lead to a better quality of life?
For the pack, and thinking about things like dissolution, territory, intraspecific strife, things like that.
So that's a tough question. On my PhD defense, I got asked by one of my committee members a question that basically dealt with getting inside an animal's head. And we will never do that. But 35 years studying wolves, I think the three things that make wolves tick is they're very social, they travel. If you've ever watched a wolf in captivity, they like to pace. And then, unfortunately, and this is what we're talking about, they kill. So given that, and that's my unpublished subjective view of wolf mind, and so given a third of that is comprised of sociality, you know, I think, and this is one of Gordon Haber's great legacies, an Alaskan that died tragically in a plane crash, and there's some disagreement with this from other people, but we have undervalued, we treat non-social species, we treat social species like we treat non-social species. So wolves are highly social. I think that's why this room is near filled, because of that connection that we have to that kind of creature. And so, you know, and every time you leave packs alone, they get complex. They do fine with pairs and pups, but you don't harvest them, and they go to this complexity immediately in what little literature there is on it. And so, yeah, I think they do lead, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but subjectively happier lives as social beings rather than loners.
Okay, maybe we have time for one more, and then those people can come up if they want more Q&A.
Yeah, one hopefully fairly quick question, although I think we've heard a lot of good research about this, but just to put it out there and get everybody's comments on it. The kind of North American wildlife management model of hunt the species to gain acceptance for that species, to gain a constituency for that species, it's a guiding principle of a lot of what we do in the U.S. And the question is, do you believe that legal regulated wolf hunting after recovery goals have been met will increase social tolerance for wolves among hunters and rural residents in Washington?
Well, 1 year after Wisconsin began its inaugural wolf hunt, we measured the same individuals' attitudes towards wolves that we had measured in 2009, and we found a continued decline. But it's early days. It might happen down the road. There's no theory to predict when or who. And there was a minority of our respondents who felt more tolerant, who we measured as more tolerant of wolves. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, when we asked them if their tolerance has changed, a majority felt it had changed positively. Huh. But the measures of tolerance didn't reflect that.
Other insights?
I can just speak again to my experience working with wolf human issues in Scandinavia. Excuse me. It certainly seems, and that was the theory, we had social scientists working on these issues, conducting different surveys, and just this whole discussion about empowerment. And certainly the research that was done in rural Norway indicated, or could indicate, that if you allow legal hunting of wolves as part of a larger management regime, first of all, that should reduce poaching, and hopefully, secondly, that will normalize the wolf in folks' eyes as another creature that they can harvest and derive benefit from, rather than just something that they need to control. You know, because we have such a squeeze situation in Norway, I'm not sure we'll ever get there. In Sweden, I have higher hopes for maybe more normalized management of wolves in that country, which is now around 350 plus wolves versus 30 in Norway. But you know, I think that that's part of the equation for sure, is to involve hunters in managed hunts, to also harvest wolves as a resource in that context. I think that's really important. I worked a lot with that issue. I created brochures on wolf hunting, for example, that were aimed at also looking at wolves as a resource, and I think that's really an important component of that. Thank you.
I'll add on that just and Donnie could probably comment on this too, but we ran into this with cougars, where we had cougar human conflicts and cougar wildlife conflicts, and we arrived at a sustainable hunting rate that allowed hunters to take their animals, but at a rate that didn't cause exacerbated problems like livestock depredations and so on and so forth. And my understanding is, Donnie, that worked rather well, and everyone kind of got what they wanted, right? You know, we reduced livestock depredations by cougars. The hunters were able to go out and harvest cougars. Those who were opposed to heavy harvest of cougars were satisfied. So I think that the sustainable hunting of wolves would be a desired goal, because it seemed, at least with cougars, it was a win-win-win all the way across the board.
I'll just maybe take a more nuanced view. I don't think there's a yes/no answer to that. I think it's going to depend upon the population that you're talking about, and in particular, so if wolves have become a symbolic issue for people, having that outward expression so if I'm killing that wolf because I'm pissed off at environmentalists, I'm feeling a lot better about myself after killing that wolf, and I don't think that's going to increase tolerance for wolves at all, in the least, for that individual, right? There are other groups of individuals that won't be motivated for those same reasons, and for them, that control that Scott was talking about is actually potentially a very positive thing, and that could motivate an increase in tolerance. Again, we don't have data to show this, but that makes sense from a theoretical perspective, that could motivate an increase in tolerance for those individuals. But it's going to be nuanced. It's going to depend upon the motivation. So
I agree with what Jeremy just said too. I think people who are intolerant of wolves are probably going to remain intolerant of wolves. I talked to Dave Meach. The people who may be more tolerant is the guy I've always wanted a wolf pelt. I've always wanted a wolf mount for my den, and I finally got to get one. And a lot of those folks, I think, I always ask, how many wolves do you need to kill before you've killed enough, before you decide you're going to go shoot a muskox or some other critter that you don't have in your den? So I think that kind of tolerance you're going to gain by simply having a hunting population who says, I got it out of my system, I killed one. But the guys that hate them, I don't have much hope for them.
Quick, one more comment.
We get quite a bit of comment about this one and what's in store for Washington. Obviously, it's another one of those issues that's quite controversial. And for us, it's too early in the process. We want to be farther down the road to recovery before we tackle that issue. But when we do, it's a public process. It's one that we'll do quite a bit of work on in terms of stakeholders and survey tools of Washingtonians and et cetera, to try to gauge that public part, where Washingtonians are and incorporate that into the public process. But ultimately, it'll be a decision of the Fish and Wildlife Commission and whether or not that's in the future for us. But like I said, at this point, we're still got a lot of work in front of us in just recovery, and are looking to be farther down the path before we start that process.
All right. Well, we're out of time. I'd like to again thank the panel, especially those who've traveled a long way to come and give your advice and insights from your studies, and to the folks from Washington for listening and taking in the information and hopefully putting it to good use. I think it's been a great session, and thanks for all of you for coming. Aaron, you want to say anything before we let him go?
That about covers it. I want to thank both our speakers and the audience as well. And just to remind everyone that I think some of our speakers, again, are going to stick around for those of you who have additional questions. So let's thank them again.